The Nexus station hung like a gleaming jewel against the backdrop of Proxima Centauri, humanity's crowning achievement in deep space engineering. Commander James Harrison stood at the observation deck, his weathered face reflected in the reinforced glass as he watched the approaching Kryvax vessel. The crystalline ship sparkled with impossible geometries, its faceted surface refracting starlight in mesmerizing patterns. Docking sequence initiated, Commander. Lieutenant Regina Walsh's voice came through the comm. The Kryvax delegation is ready to board. Harrison straightened his uniform. After 20 years in the Space Force, he'd seen humanity's first contacts with a dozen alien species, but the Kryvax were different. Their crystalline biology defied conventional understanding, and their technological advances had caught everyone by surprise. This diplomatic mission was crucial. The Kryvax controlled resource-rich systems that humanity desperately needed. Acknowledged, Lieutenant. Meet me at Docking Bay 3. Harrison's boots echoed through the station's pristine corridors as he made his way down. The station's crew, a mix of military personnel and civilian specialists, nodded respectfully as he passed. The Kryvax emerged from their ship like living sculptures, humanoid forms composed of translucent crystal, internal lights pulsing with each movement. Their leader, designated First Facet, towered over Harrison at nearly 8 feet tall. Commander Harrison, First Facet's voice resonated like wind through crystal chimes. Your station impresses. Such potential. Something in the way First Facet said potential made Harrison's combat instincts twitch, but he maintained his diplomatic smile. Welcome to Nexus Station. We've prepared your quarters in the diplomatic wing. The next 12 hours proceeded smoothly, too smoothly. Harrison noticed the Kryvax delegates seemed more interested in the station's infrastructure than the trade negotiations. They asked pointed questions about power distribution, life support systems, and defensive capabilities, all couched in diplomatic pleasantries. Harrison was in his quarters, reviewing security footage, when the first explosion ripped through the station. The lights died. Emergency systems kicked in, bathing everything in red. Harrison grabbed his sidearm just as his door burst inward, revealing 2 Kryvax warriors, their crystalline forms now sharp and weaponized. Security breach in all sectors. Walsh's voice crackled through emergency channels. They're everywhere, they've bypassed her transmission cut off in static. Harrison dove behind his desk as crystalline shards shredded the air where he'd stood. He fired back, but his bullets sparked harmlessly off their mineral forms. The Kryvax advanced, their bodies reconfiguring into weapon-like projections. Years of combat training took over. Harrison kicked over his desk's power unit, the surge of electricity causing his attackers to momentarily freeze. He sprinted past them, out into chaos. The station's corridors had become a war zone. Human crew members fought desperately against the crystalline invaders, but they were hopelessly outmatched. Harrison saw Walsh across the main concourse, leading a group of civilians toward the escape pods, before a crystal spear erupted from her chest. This is Commander Harrison to all personnel, abandon ship. Get to the escape pods. He fought his way through the station, helping who he could, watching others fall. The Kryvax were methodical, efficient, and utterly merciless. First Facet's voice echoed through the station's comm system, distorted and mocking. Your species builds such magnificent structures, Commander. But you lack the vision to use them properly. Nexus Station will serve as our fortress, the launching point for our expansion into human space. Your diplomatic naivete has doomed your people. Harrison made it to the central control room, finding it already overrun with Kryvax warriors. He watched in horror as the last escape pods were picked off by Kryvax ships that had decloaked around the station. The betrayal was complete, they'd planned this from the start. A crystalline blade caught Harrison in the side. He stumbled, fell, and rolled into a maintenance shaft. The Kryvax warrior followed, but Harrison had spent years memorizing every inch of his station. He triggered the emergency seal, trapping himself in the shaft network but keeping the Kryvax out. Bleeding, enraged, and with nothing left to lose, Harrison dragged himself deeper into the station's maintenance systems. The Kryvax thought they'd won, thought they'd killed or captured everyone. But they'd made one critical mistake: they'd left him alive. As Harrison patched his wound with a medical kit from a maintenance cache, he could hear the Kryvax beginning to repurpose his station. His station. 20 years he'd spent here, learning every system, every backup, every weakness. Now, that knowledge would become his weapon. First Facet, he whispered into the darkness, you should have killed me when you had the chance. The Nexus station was no longer a diplomatic outpost. It was about to become the deadliest weapon in human space, and James Harrison its vengeful ghost. First Facet stood in the repurposed command center, crystalline form refracting the emergency lighting in crimson patterns. Around him, Kryvax warriors had transformed the once pristine bridge into a crystalline nest, organic-looking mineral formations growing from every surface. Report, First Facet commanded, his voice resonating through the crystalline growths. Lower sectors secured, his sub-commander, Sharp Edge, responded. Human resistance eliminated. 98% of crew confirmed terminated or captured. However, First Facet's internal lights pulsed dangerously. However, Commander Harrison's body was not found. The maintenance shaft where he was last seen leads to a vast network of one human, hiding in the walls like vermin. First Facet dismissed. He will die soon enough. Focus on fortifying our position. The human fleet will respond once they realize their station has fallen. But Harrison was far from dying. In the maintenance tunnels below, he had turned a junction room into his base of operations. Holographic displays, jerry-rigged from salvaged tech, showed him the station's status. The Kryvax were efficient, he had to give them that. They'd already begun converting large sections of the station, their crystalline technology spreading like a mineral infection. Let's see how you like this, Harrison muttered, fingers flying over a salvaged console. He had spent the last 24 hours placing remote charges near key crystal formations, studying how they grew, how they connected. Now it was time to test their weaknesses. The explosion in Cargo Bay 6 was small, precise. Harrison watched through security feeds as the crystalline growths there shattered, their resonance disrupted. The Kryvax guards nearby stumbled, momentarily disoriented. Interesting. Security breach in Cargo Bay 6. The Kryvax comm channels erupted with chatter. Crystal matrix disrupted. Sending repair team. A second explosion cut off the transmission. Harrison had mined that route too. 2 more Kryvax warriors shattered into crystalline shards. In the command center, First Facet's form pulsed with rage. Find him. Turn every scanner, every sensor to the maintenance areas. One human cannot hide forever. But Harrison wasn't just hiding. Each attack taught him more about his enemy. The Kryvax weren't individual entities like humans, they were connected through their crystalline networks, sharing information, coordinating perfectly. It made them formidable, but it was also a weakness. Disrupt the network, and you disrupted them all. Harrison began hitting environmental controls next. The Kryvax, he discovered, were sensitive to rapid temperature changes. A sudden blast of heat followed by cold could crack their outer layers. He triggered the environmental systems in sections, herding groups of warriors into killing zones. Sir. Sharp-Edge's report was urgent. We've lost contact with Team 7 and 9. Engineering reports system malfunctions across multiple decks. The human, he knows this station's systems intimately. First Facet's crystalline form vibrated with fury. Lock down all critical systems. Override every control panel, every access point. Too late, Harrison whispered, watching from his hideout. He'd already placed backdoors in the station's computer core. Years of paranoia and security drills had led him to create emergency protocols that even he had hoped never to use. The next phase of his attack targeted their communication frequencies. The Kryvax relied on crystalline resonance to coordinate. Harrison began broadcasting on matching frequencies, creating disrupting interference. Warriors began losing contact with each other, their perfect coordination faltering. But his most devastating discovery came by accident. While rerouting power through the station's science labs, Harrison found research data on the Kryvax physiology. Their crystalline forms weren't just armor, they were their bodies, growing and repairing through complex molecular bonds. And the station's terraforming systems, designed to maintain precise molecular conditions, could be weaponized to disrupt those bonds. Commander Harrison. First Facet's voice echoed through the station's speakers. Your attacks are impressive but futile. You cannot save this station. Even now, our reinforcements approach. Surrender, and I will grant you a quick death. Harrison looked at his displays. The Kryvax leader was right about one thing: more ships were coming. But that was exactly what he'd been waiting for. The station's terraforming systems weren't powerful enough to affect the entire Kryvax force. But the main reactor, if properly modified, could project those same molecular disruption waves across a much larger area. Sorry, First Facet, Harrison replied, finally breaking his silence. But I didn't spend the last day hiding. I spent it learning about your biology, your weaknesses. This station isn't just my home. It's about to become your tomb. As alarms began blaring throughout the station, Harrison initiated his master plan. The reactor core began to pulse with new energy patterns, and the first crystals started to crack. The hunt was over. The real war was about to begin. The Kryvax Honor Guard moved through Deck 7 in perfect crystalline formation, their bodies humming with shared resonance. Each corridor showed signs of battle, scorch marks from energy weapons, shattered crystal fragments, and damaged systems flickering fitfully. Movement detected in Junction 12B, one warrior reported, their internal lights pulsing in sync. Thermal signature matches human parameters. The squad advanced, weapons formed from their own crystalline bodies extending like jagged spears. They reached the junction, empty. Then the blast doors slammed shut, trapping them. A basic trap, the lead warrior transmitted. Easily broken. The temperature in the sealed corridor suddenly plunged 200 degrees. The Kryvax warriors screamed in unified agony as their crystalline forms contracted violently. Hairline fractures appeared across their surfaces. Then, just as suddenly, heating elements in the walls flared to maximum. The thermal shock was too much. All 6 warriors shattered into glittering shards. From his new hiding spot 3 decks away, Harrison watched through the security feeds. That's for Lieutenant Walsh, he muttered, remembering her final moments. First Facet's voice boomed through the station, impressive, Commander. You've learned to kill us efficiently. But you forget, we are a collective. Each death teaches us. Adapts us. Your tricks will not work forever. Harrison knew First Facet was right. Already, he could see the Kryvax warriors developing denser crystalline structures, more resistant to thermal shock. Their networked intelligence was formidable. But Harrison had one advantage they couldn't match: decades of human ingenuity and spite. In the converted command center, First Facet conferred with Sharp Edge. Their crystalline forms merged temporarily, sharing data at the molecular level. The humans' attacks follow a pattern, Sharp Edge observed. He strikes, retreats through maintenance tunnels, then emerges elsewhere. If we could predict. No, First Facet interrupted. He wants us to chase him. Every pursuit leads to another trap. We must change strategy. Seal all maintenance access points. Fill them with our growth crystals. Force him into the open. Harrison felt the vibrations as the Kryvax began their new assault. Their crystalline technology spread through the maintenance tunnels like living ice, blocking his escape routes. But he'd anticipated this. The Kryvax thought they were trapping him. Instead, they were following his trail of breadcrumbs straight toward their doom. The station's main reactor had required extensive modifications. Harrison had spent hours rerouting power, adjusting molecular resonance frequencies, and calibrating the terraforming systems. One wrong calculation and he'd destroy the station before achieving his goal. The margin for error was microscopic. Warning, the station's AI announced coolly. Unauthorized modifications to reactor systems detected. Containment failure possible. Override safety protocols, Harrison commanded. Authorization Harrison 00 final. As he worked, Harrison's mind drifted to the day he'd first taken command of Nexus Station. He'd sworn to protect it, to make it a symbol of peace. Now he was transforming it into a weapon of unprecedented destruction. The irony wasn't lost on him. The Kryvax growth crystals were getting closer. Harrison could hear them creeping through the walls, their resonance making the metal sing. He needed more time. The reactor modifications weren't ready. Found you, Sharp-Edged's voice came from behind him. Harrison spun to find the crystalline warrior emerging from a wall, its form rippling like liquid glass. Most impressive, human. You've killed more of us than any other single being in our history. Harrison backed away, buying seconds. Then you know what comes next. Your death. Sharp-Edged advanced. No. Harrison smiled grimly. Your evolution. He slapped a device onto Sharp-Edged's crystalline form, a prototype he'd built from the science lab's molecular disruptors. Sharp-Edged screamed as the device activated, its crystalline structure beginning to transform. What have you done? The warrior's form was changing, becoming organic, flesh-like. Forced evolution, Harrison explained. Your species chose crystal forms for their perfection, their immortality. But they're not natural. The building blocks of life are carbon, water, flesh. I'm not going to kill your people, Sharp-Edged. I'm going to force you to become mortal again. Sharp-Edged's crystalline form continued to mutate, becoming something neither human nor Kryvax. Harrison downloaded the data from his device, the final piece he needed for his reactor modifications. First facet, he broadcast. You wanted to know my plan? Come to the reactor core. See what humanity is capable of when pushed too far. In the command center, First Facet received Sharp-Edged's fragmented transmissions, saw the horrifying transformation. For the first time in centuries, the Kryvax leader felt something alien to his crystalline nature, fear. The final confrontation was about to begin, and the fate of two species hung in the balance. First Facet strode through the corridors toward the reactor core, flanked by his most elite warriors. Their crystalline forms had been modified, densified to resist thermal shock and molecular disruption. But the transformation of Sharp-Edged had shaken them all, a horror they hadn't faced in millennia. The reactor core thrummed with ominous energy. Harrison had transformed the massive chamber into a technological nightmare. Terraforming emitters lined the walls, their fields intersecting in complex patterns. The reactor itself pulsed with an unnatural resonance that made the Kryvax warriors' forms vibrate uncomfortably. Welcome to evolution, Harrison's voice echoed through the chamber. He stood on a gantry above the reactor, looking down at his enemies. His uniform was torn and bloodied, but his eyes burned with fierce determination. You've lost your mind, human, First Facet declared. This station, this sector of space, it all belongs to the Kryvax now. Your species will be contained, controlled, harvested for resources. Harrison laughed, a harsh sound. You still don't understand. I'm not fighting for the station anymore. I'm fighting for your souls. He pressed a control, and the reactor's resonance changed. The elite warriors screamed as their crystalline forms began to vibrate. But instead of shattering, they began to change. Organic matter began to form within their transparent bodies, blood vessels, organs, cellular structures. We chose to ascend. First Facet roared, his own form fighting the transformation. We left behind the weakness of flesh eons ago. We became perfect. You became stagnant, Harrison countered. Unchanging. Unable to grow, to truly feel, to live. I studied your history in the station's databases. Your species was beautiful once, poets, artists, dreamers. Then you chose crystalline immortality, and your culture froze like your bodies. The reactor's pulse intensified. More Kryvacs throughout the station began to transform. Their networked consciousness, once cold and perfect, became chaotic with newfound emotions and sensations. Some fought it, trying to maintain their crystalline forms. Others embraced the change, their first genuine choice in centuries. First Facet launched himself at the gantry, his crystalline form still mostly intact through sheer willpower. I will end this abomination. Harrison stood his ground. The transformation is already spreading through your crystalline network. Your entire species is linked. What happens here affects all Kryvacs, everywhere. You can't stop evolution. The Kryvacs leader's attack never landed. His crystalline form began to crack, not from damage, but from within. Organic tissue pushed through the fractures, bringing with it something the Kryvacs had abandoned, the capacity for change. What is this sensation? First Facet's voice was changing, becoming more natural, more alive. Fear. Hope. Confusion. Humanity. Harrison's voice was almost gentle now. Welcome back to the realm of the living. The chamber had become a crucible of transformation. The elite warriors were no longer perfect crystalline formations but transitional beings, caught between mineral and organic existence. Their networked consciousness fragmenting into individual minds, experiencing genuine individuality for the first time in their species' history. Throughout the station, the change spread. The Kryvacs' growth crystals began to reseed, replaced by organic structures. The cold, geometric perfection of their technology softened, became more natural, more alive. You're not killing us, First Facet realized, staring at his partially transformed hands. You're saving us from ourselves. Harrison nodded. Humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our weapons. It's our ability to adapt, to change, to feel. Even pain has purpose, it teaches us, helps us grow. Your perfect crystalline forms denied you that. The reactor's resonance reached its peak, the terraforming fields extending beyond the station. The transformation would spread to every Kryvacs, offering them a choice they hadn't had in millennia, the choice to be mortal, to be imperfect, to be alive. But victory had its price. The reactor was destabilizing, the power requirements for such massive molecular manipulation proving too much for even Nexus Station's advanced systems. Commander, the station's AI warned, reactor containment failing. Critical overload in 10 minutes. Harrison looked at the transformed Kryvacs below, their former crystalline perfection now a distant memory. Time for one last choice, First Facet. Help me save this station, or we all die together. The fate of both species now hung on the decision of a being learning to feel again for the first time in countless generations. The reactor core blazed like an artificial sun, its containment fields flickering dangerously. Alarms blared throughout Nexus Station as systems approached critical failure. Harrison and First Facet, now more organic than crystal, worked side by side at the reactor controls. The molecular resonance is cascading, Harrison shouted over the reactor's roar. If we don't stabilize it, the transformation wave could tear the station apart. First Facet's partially transformed hands moved across the controls with desperate precision. Our crystalline technology, it was never meant to interface with organic matter on this scale. The power requirements are exponential. Throughout the station, the remaining Kryvacs were completing their transformation. Some emerged from their crystalline shells like butterflies from chrysalises, while others fought the change until their forms shattered, leaving only their reborn organic selves. Their once perfect networked consciousness had fragmented into millions of individual minds, each experiencing emotion for the first time in eons. "Commander," the station's AI announced, "containment failure in 5 minutes. Recommend immediate evacuation." Harrison shook his head. "No evacuation this time. We either save this station or die trying." He turned to First Facet. "Your people still have some crystalline technology left. Can we use it to channel the excess energy?" First Facet's eyes, actual, living eyes now, widened with realization. "Yes, yes. The growth crystals we use to spread through the station. They're connected in a lattice network. If we repurpose them." They worked frantically, rerouting power through the crystalline networks that still remained. The Kryvacs warriors who could still access their former abilities joined in, using their dwindling connection to the crystal matrix to help stabilize the energy flow. 3 minutes to containment failure, the AI warned. Harrison's hands flew across the controls, synchronizing the terraforming fields with the crystal lattice. "First Facet, on my mark, order your people to channel everything into the network. We'll use your old technology one last time to save your new future." The transformed Kryvacs leader nodded, feeling fear and hope simultaneously, sensations that would have been impossible in his crystalline form. He broadcast to his people, not through perfect resonance now, but through voiced commands and emergency channels. The response was immediate and profound. Throughout Nexus Station, transformed Kryvacs placed their hands on the remaining crystal structures. The lattice network began to glow, absorbing the reactor's excess energy. The crystalline matrices, designed for perfect order, began to break down in a controlled cascade. 1 minute to containment failure. "It's not enough," First Facet growled in frustration. "We need more conductivity in the crystal network." Harrison looked at his former enemy, now ally. "Your body. You're still partially crystalline. You could complete the circuit." "It would complete my transformation," First Facet realized. "No going back. 30 seconds to containment failure." First Facet stood tall, his partially crystalline form glinting under the reactor's light. "My people chose crystalline perfection because we feared change. You showed us that change is not just inevitable, it's necessary." He placed his hands on the main control panel. "Do it." Harrison activated the final sequence. Energy surged through First Facet's remaining crystalline structure, using him as a conduit to stabilize the entire network. The former Kryvacs leader screamed, not in perfect resonance now, but with raw, organic vocal cords. 10 seconds, 5, containment stabilizing, reactor returning to normal parameters. The emergency lights faded, replaced by the station's standard illumination. In the sudden quiet, Harrison helped First Facet to his feet. The Kryvacs leader was fully organic now, his crystalline form completely transformed. "How do you feel?" Harrison asked. First Facet flexed his new fingers, feeling sensation, temperature, texture. "Everything. I feel everything." He looked at Harrison with newfound understanding. "We thought ourselves superior in our crystalline forms. But we were just hiding from the complexity of real life." Over the next few hours, the station slowly returned to normal. The transformed Kryvacs gathered in the main hall, no longer a perfect collective, but individuals learning to be themselves again. Some laughed, some cried, some simply sat in silence, overwhelmed by their new sensations. Harrison stood at his familiar observation window, watching the Kryvacs ships outside the station power down their weapons. First Facet joined him, both of them reflected in the reinforced glass, human and transformed Kryvax, no longer enemies. Your people will need help, Harrison said. Learning to be mortal again won't be easy. First Facet nodded. We request that Nexus Station become what it was meant to be, not just a diplomatic outpost, but a place of transformation. Will you help us remember how to live? Harrison looked at his station, scarred but standing, a symbol now of not just peace, but evolution and growth. Together, he agreed. We'll learn together. As news of the transformation spread across human and Kryvax space, Nexus Station took on a new role. It became known as the Crucible, where two species had fought, died, and ultimately found a way forward through change and adaptation. The station's scars remained, but they stood as reminders that sometimes the greatest victories come not from destroying your enemies, but from helping them grow. Commander James Harrison would go down in history not as a warrior who defeated the Kryvax, but as the man who helped them rediscover their humanity, and in doing so, proved that humanity's greatest strength was never in its weapons, but in its capacity to adapt, to feel, and to change.